my husband kicked me out on a freezing winter night. My name is Laura Bennett, and I was 41 years old when it happened. I stood on the sidewalk with one suitcase and nowhere to go. The wind cut through my coat, and the street felt silent and cold. My hands were shaking as I looked at the dark house behind me. That night felt like the end of my life. But deep down, I did not know it yet, this painful moment would become my fresh start. Before that cold night, my life looked calm and simple. I worked in a small flower shop on a quiet street. Every morning I unlocked the door and breathed in the sweet smell of fresh flowers. Roses, lilies, and tulips covered the tables in soft colors. I spent hours arranging them into small bouquets. Turning simple flowers into something beautiful always made me feel proud. Little by little, that shop became a place where I felt peaceful and useful. Then Daniel walked into my life. The first time he came to the shop, he asked for a bouquet of red roses. He spoke with confidence and smiled easily. His voice sounded warm and friendly. After that day, he returned again and again. Sometimes he bought flowers. Sometimes he only stopped by to talk. Our conversations became longer each week. Soon, we began meeting outside the shop. Daniel had a stable job and strong plans for the future. One evening, he looked at me across the dinner table and said something that changed everything. "You work too hard," he told me gently. "You don't have to do that anymore." I asked what he meant. He smiled and said, "If we build a life together, I will take care of everything. At home, you will be happier." His words sounded kind and protective. Deep down, I believed he wanted the best for me. So I made a decision that felt small at the time, but changed my path completely. I left the flower shop. When I packed my tools, I paused for a moment. My old flower scissors rested in my hand before I placed them in my bag. I did not know why I wanted to keep them. After that, I stayed home. At first, Daniel was thoughtful. Some evenings, he brought dinner and talked about his day. We watched television together and planned the future. For a while, everything felt peaceful. But slowly, things began to change. Daniel started controlling small parts of my life. He handled the money and said it was easier that way. He asked where I went and who I spoke with. The questions became rules. One evening, he looked at me and said coldly, "You don't understand real work." I stayed silent. After that, I stopped calling my old friends. My phone stayed quiet on the table. The house was clean and quiet, but it felt empty. Day by day, my world grew smaller. Soon, the house felt too quiet. After I stopped working, Daniel handled all the money in our home. At first, I did not think much about it. He paid the bills and bought groceries. I trusted him, and life continued quietly. But slowly, small things began to change. If I needed something, I had to ask him first. Even simple things required permission. One cold afternoon, I stood near the door and looked at my old coat. The wind outside was strong, and winter was coming. I walked into the living room and spoke carefully. "Daniel," I said, "can I buy a winter coat?" He did not even look up from his phone. His face tightened a little. "You already have one," he replied. His voice sounded flat. I looked down at my coat again. The sleeves were worn and thin, but I said nothing more. I simply nodded and walked away. Deep down, something felt wrong, but I pushed the thought aside and tried to carry on. The next morning, Daniel came home earlier than usual. He walked through the door with a small bouquet of flowers in his hand. The bright colors surprised me. He smiled and placed them on the table. "Sorry about yesterday," he said. His voice sounded softer again. For a moment, my chest felt lighter. Maybe he was just tired from work. Maybe I worried too much. I arranged the flowers in a glass of water and tried to believe things would improve. Little by little, I hoped our life would return to the calm days we once shared. But the quiet tension returned again. One evening, Daniel came home very late. The house had been silent for hours before the door finally opened. When he stepped inside, a strange perfume filled the air around him. It was not my perfume. The scent stayed in the room like a question I could not ignore. I walked toward him slowly. My voice felt small when I spoke. "Were you with someone tonight?" I asked. Daniel dropped his bag onto the table with a loud sound. His eyes flashed with anger. "Stop asking stupid questions," he snapped. The room suddenly felt colder. My hands trembled without control. I stared at the floor and said nothing more. The silence between us felt heavy. Later that night, I sat alone in the kitchen. The lights were dim, and the house felt too quiet again. I opened an old drawer near the table. Inside lay a pair of flower scissors from my old job. The metal felt cool when I picked them up. For a moment, the smell of fresh flowers returned to my memory. I closed my eyes and breathed slowly. That small memory felt warm, like a tiny light in a dark room. At that time, I did not understand why I kept those scissors. But one day, they would help me start over. One evening, the house felt strangely quiet. The clock ticked slowly on the wall, and the wind outside grew stronger. I was washing a cup in the kitchen when I heard the front door open. Daniel walked inside, but he was not alone. A young woman stepped in behind him. She looked confident and comfortable, like she already belonged there. Her coat was bright, and the smell of strong perfume filled the hallway. For a moment I simply stood there, holding the wet cup in my hand. My heart began to beat faster. Daniel did not look at me the way he used to. His face was cold and distant. "Laura," he said flatly, "pack your things." I blinked in confusion. "What?" He walked to the door and pulled it open. A rush of freezing air filled the room. Snow blew across the front steps. "This house is mine," he said. "You can leave now." The young woman stood quietly behind him. She crossed her arms and watched the scene without speaking. Her eyes moved around the house like she was already studying her new home. For a moment, my body would not move. My hands felt numb. The room spun slightly, and the cup slipped from my fingers into the sink. But Daniel's eyes did not soften. So I walked to the bedroom and packed one suitcase. My movements were slow and silent. Each shirt and sweater felt heavier than before. When I returned to the living room, Daniel grabbed the suitcase and pushed it outside. Snow covered the ground like a white blanket. I stepped onto the sidewalk, and the cold air touched my face. My breath came out in small clouds. My hands were shaking. For a few seconds, I just stood there in silence. Then I lowered my eyes to my hand. I was still holding the old flower scissors from the drawer. And in that quiet moment, deep down, I suddenly knew where I needed to go. I walked through the empty streets without looking back. Snow fell slowly from the dark sky. The cold wind touched my face, and my fingers felt numb. My suitcase felt heavy in my hand, but I kept moving forward. Step by step, I walked through the quiet neighborhood. The streetlights looked blurry through the falling snow. My breath came out in small clouds as I tried to stay warm. I did not know exactly where I was going, but deep down I felt one small idea growing inside me. After a while, I reached a familiar street corner. I stopped and lifted my head. Across the road stood a small flower shop. Warm yellow light shone through the front window. For a moment, I simply stared at it. My heart beat faster. That place held a piece of my old life. I walked toward the door slowly. My hand trembled as I pushed it open. A small bell rang above the door. The shop smelled the same as before, fresh roses, lilies, and wet leaves. The scent wrapped around me like a forgotten memory. Behind the counter, a woman looked up. "Laura?" she said with surprise. It was Mrs. Harper, my old boss. For a moment, I could not answer. My throat felt tight, and tears filled my eyes. I placed my suitcase on the floor and lifted my hand. The old flower scissors rested in my palm. Mrs. Harper looked at them and then at my face. Her expression softened immediately. "You came back," she said gently. I nodded slowly. My voice was quiet when I finally spoke. "Can I start over here?" The words felt small, but they carried all my hope. Mrs. Harper walked around the counter and stood beside me. She placed a warm hand on my shoulder and smiled kindly. "Laura," she said, "you always had a place here." I closed my eyes for a moment and took a deep breath. My shoulders relaxed, and the cold inside my chest slowly faded. For the first time that night, I felt safe. And deep down, I knew my life could begin again. Months passed after that cold night. Life slowly moved forward, little by little. I worked every day at the flower shop with Mrs. Harper. In the beginning, I felt unsure, but my hands remembered the work. I arranged roses, lilies, and tulips again. Each morning, the shop smelled fresh and calm. Day by day, my confidence began to build up. Customers smiled when they saw the bouquets I made. Some people even asked for me by name. Hearing that gave me quiet strength. Working there helped me start over. I learned new designs and practiced carefully with every arrangement. My hands moved faster, and my mind felt clearer. The shop became a place where I could breathe again. While my life slowly improved, Daniel's life moved in the opposite direction. The young woman who entered our house that night did not stay long. She left him after a few months. Soon after that, Daniel lost a large amount of money in a risky investment. Without that money, he could not keep the house. One by one, the things he believed he controlled disappeared. One rainy afternoon, the bell above the shop door rang. I looked up from the flowers on the table. Daniel stood in the doorway. His coat looked worn, and rain covered his shoulders. His face seemed older and tired. The shop stayed silent. Even the rain outside sounded louder. Then he stepped forward slowly. "Laura," he said in a low voice, "I made a mistake." I looked at him carefully. My heart felt calm in a way I did not expect. The anger from the past had faded. I was not afraid anymore. And for the first time, I realized how strong I had become. Daniel stood quietly in front of the counter. Rain dripped slowly from his coat onto the floor. For a moment, he looked around the shop, as if he did not belong there anymore. Then he lowered his head and spoke again. "I thought you needed me," he said. His voice sounded tired and uncertain. I looked at him calmly and shook my head. "I only needed respect," I answered softly. The words felt simple, but they carried years of silence inside them. Daniel looked at the floor and rubbed his hands together. Outside, the rain continued to fall against the windows. The sound filled the quiet shop. The room fell silent. I watched him carefully. Once, I would have felt weak in this moment. Once, I would have begged him to stay. But life had changed. Over time, I had learned to stand on my own feet. Daniel looked up again. His eyes searched my face, hoping for forgiveness. But I did not move. Instead, I walked slowly toward the door and opened it. Cool air entered the shop. The rain smelled fresh outside. Daniel understood the meaning of that silent invitation. He hesitated for a moment, then stepped toward the door. His shoulders looked smaller than I remembered. Without another word, he walked outside into the rain. The bell above the door rang softly as it closed. The shop became quiet again. I stood there for a few seconds and took a deep breath. My hands rested on the counter. The silence no longer felt lonely. For the first time in a long time, the quiet felt peaceful. 2 years passed after that rainy afternoon. Life moved forward, slowly but steadily. Over time, the flower shop became more than just a workplace for me. It became a place where I built a new life. Mrs. Harper trusted me more each month, and eventually she asked me to manage the shop. I felt surprised when she first said it, but I also felt proud. Every morning I arrived early and opened the shop. The air smelled fresh with roses, lilies, and green leaves. I arranged bouquets carefully on the wooden tables. My hands moved with confidence now. Customers often stopped to watch the flowers come together. Many of them smiled when they walked through the door. Some greeted me by name. Those small moments made the shop feel warm and alive. The quiet life I once feared no longer felt lonely. It felt peaceful. I had learned to stand on my own feet and carry on with courage. Day by day, I built something that belonged to me. One sunny morning, I stood near the window and looked across the bright room. Sunlight touched the colorful flowers and filled the shop with soft light. In my hand, I held the old flower scissors I had carried since the night I left my old home. The metal was worn from years of use, but it still worked perfectly. Just like me. I turned them slowly in my hand and smiled. My life looked very different now. It was simple, calm, and honest. And for the first time in many years, I truly felt at home. Life sometimes closes a door when we least expect it. In that moment, everything can feel dark and uncertain. We may believe our world has ended, and we may wonder how we will move forward. I once felt that same fear standing alone in the cold night. But life has a quiet way of guiding us toward new paths. Sometimes the hardest moments push us to start over and discover our real strength. What feels like a loss today may become the beginning of something better tomorrow. Sometimes losing a home helps you find your true place in the world. And little by little, you learn to stand on your own feet and build a life that truly belongs to you. Laura's story is not only about one woman. Situations like this still happen in many lives today, but the world has changed in important ways. Technology has opened many new doors for people everywhere. Today, you do not have to depend completely on someone else to build a life. Many people now work online. Some sell products from home. Others create content, teach skills, or do freelance work on the internet. Social media and digital tools have helped many people start small businesses and earn their own income. When you build your own skills and learn something new, your confidence grows. Earning even a small income can give you a sense of security and freedom. It also helps you make choices for your own life. Independence does not mean you must walk alone. It simply means you are able to stand on your own feet. Healthy relationships today work best when both people continue to grow. When two partners learn, work, and improve themselves, they have more to share with each other. They can talk about ideas, support each other's goals, and move forward together with mutual respect. So it helps to keep learning new skills every year. Technology can help you grow and explore new opportunities. Building even a small source of income can strengthen your confidence. Because in the end, a strong relationship is built by two strong people walking forward together. Now I want to ask you one question. If you were in Laura's place, what would you do? Would you leave or would you stay? Comment leave or stay below. Your answer may help someone who feels lost right now. If you enjoyed this story, please like the video and subscribe for more English stories every week. And remember, sometimes the hardest night leads to a beautiful new beginning.